Welcome to another episode of Health Creators. This is Liv, and I'm joined here today with Emmanuel Hui, CEO of Jade Pebble Accelerator, and formerly co-founder of Moogene, which he took from zero to IPO in 4 years. Today, we are going to talk about how to raise venture financing from Chinese investors. But first, I wanted to start by asking Emmanuel more about his journey. So Emmanuel, tell us about your journey, how you founded Moogene from your college dorm, and how you got into VC.
Well, thanks for having me. I was a senior at Dartmouth at the time, 2016, December. And it was the time when I also got my senior fellowship. So it's like a special arrangement at Dartmouth where students didn't have to go to class and they could have a research budget to research something that's outside of the regular curricular scope. And so I was selected as one of the few students by the college president to, and I was doing some extraction of diarylheptanoids, like these compounds basically in turmeric, ginger, cannabis. There's just specific compounds that can be translated into, pharmaceutically active and potent substances, but using a method that was very, basically you can do it in your kitchen. And it's like, how do I develop a process to extract these APIs? Yeah. But in that process, I didn't have to go to class. So my professors were like, hey, we want to start a company. But, if they did it, then they'd have to give up a significant portion of their equity to the university, or they'd have to declare quite a bit of outside income. It gets really complicated with their engagement with the university. Yeah. But if a student starts a company, then it's a clean slate.
Interesting.
Yeah. So I get to, we don't have to declare as much. There's less complication in the whole incorporation process and the equity.
So basically, you were set up as the co-founder to prevent any IP issues with the university.
Exactly. I was the mule. I was the one that was signing off on all the documents to be CEO on paper, really. And they gave me 5% equity or thereabouts. And really, they trusted me enough to be pitching, really, their idea. It really wasn't my idea. And I knew nothing back then. I thought I was going to go to med school, right? That was the plan the whole way. The usual, be a good Asian student, learn piano, get good grades, get into an Ivy League and go to med school, become a doctor. That was the path. But then, that time they were like, hey, you don't have to go to class. So during the day, 9 to 5, could you work with us on this new project, work on this new company, you incorporate it, you do the legal, you make the pitch decks, you do all that stuff. And then from, after that, have dinner, and then 8 to 3 a.m., I'd do my own work to graduate, my own senior fellowship research. Wow. So I'd be in the lab, doing then I'd wake up in the morning, 9 to 5 again, to start again. So it was fun. It was an experience that taught me a lot through trial and error. I knew nothing, right? I was just a kid in college, and I would go pitch again and again and again. I think I pitched upwards of I have a list. I gave over 700 pitches. Wow. And every time I pitched, I would be asked. VCs would ask me things, right? Yeah. And the more they ask me, the more let me get back to you. I'll let you know in a bit. But that process of not knowing shame, not knowing what to not knowing, there was nobody teaching me what to do at the time, not really. Then through pitching again and again, I sort of triangulated, okay, this is how a VC thinks, this is how I should formulate our company, our structure. And initially, one thing that changed quite a bit, we were targeting actually diabetes. Yeah. We were doing nanoliposomes to encapsulate CRISPR and using that to target the DPP4 gene and doing that, comparing that with sitagliptin. So now it's like a very popular GLP-1 drug now to control diabetes. Back then, we have very good data published, Nature, biotechnology and everything. Everything was out in the public. I presented it at a conference, won awards at conferences. But then once we talked to VCs and talked to the FDA, they were like, we don't like this. Because as you know as well. diabetes already has existing solutions.
Yeah.
And the risk of a clinical trial failure is so high because the FDA is going to require you to do like 10,000, 20,000 patients, or something ridiculous to do. And it's going to be really costly to push a diabetes drug out to a market using a new modality of treatment. So instead, we pivoted to doing KRAS mutation. And so we were targeting cancer, targeting rare orphan, basically, diseases, rare diseases. And so and also pivoting to, instead of a systemic delivery of gene editing materials, we pivoted to topical delivery. So starting with the skin, and we see that as a recurring sort of risk mitigation strategy for a lot of new technology modalities. You see that with Legend. You see that with Spot Biotherapeutics that's coming out now. Doing dermal treatments before they go into more complicated disease delivery mechanisms. But yeah, that's how we started. We started, just me, 2 profs, just pushing. One of the clinical prof was working with us at Dartmouth, and we had a prof at Harvard that was doing the nano stuff, the nanoparticle fabrication and all that stuff. And so eventually, after pitching all this time, Samsung got interested, and through one of their funds. They have many funds. Yeah, but this is one of their funds. They were interested, and then they became an investor. And the Harvard prof is Korean, and then we moved the whole company to Korea.
Oh, cool!
And that's when.
Did you move to Korea as well?
I didn't. I was there for like maybe 2 months total, but it didn't make sense for a 20-something-year-old brat with no MD, no PhD, no experience to be at the helm of a company. So I know my place, and I was like, I'm going to step down.
I see. So after you did 700 pitches and raised from Samsung, was that like a Series A or?
Yeah, that wasn't even an A. That was more like that was our first round. So whatever you call it nowadays, you got $300 million Series A's nowadays. So it's weird to say what it was, but it was just like a seed round. Initially, it was just like $3 million to begin with. Okay,
so you stepped down after the raise, essentially.
Yeah, after the raise, I stepped down, and then it got bigger and bigger without me. And that's all it happened in Korea. And during that time, we had to be in Korea a couple times to sign documents, to sort of hand over equity, to restructure things. And I wasn't really involved much after that. I really was just involved in the U.S. part of it, in getting the IP out of Harvard, getting the IP out of, and setting it up as an entity, and presenting, preparing and presenting our materials, writing our scientific papers for publication, and so that was mostly what I was 0 to 1 part of the work. Is what I did, and that's really all I know, because after that I stepped down. And then I came back to Hong Kong, and then I joined a fund of funds managing all of their healthcare exposure. Looking at, we had over 600 biotech companies under that portfolio in the fund of funds. And so for that, I learned a lot, because I went from being the company side all of a sudden now to the LP side.
But why did you decide to move?
Well, because my parents are here. I grew up here. This is home for me. I was still waiting to see, should I take the MCATs now? Do I do what's next? Right? What's next? I didn't know.
But you didn't want to go back to company building?
I could, but then what's next? What's the next asset I'm going to build? I didn't know yet, and I was I came back to Hong Kong. I had a couple months of good fun. A couple months where I did nothing. Right, I just wake up, go to the beach, run, go home. Play video games, cook dinner, go out with friends, whatever. It was like and then that got boring. That got okay. I can do more. And then that's when I joined the fund of funds, just as part-time. Part-time became full-time, became overtime, became, just run with it. So.
Is it kind of crazy letting go of something that was, probably, at some point your all-consuming number one thing, and then you just handed it over?
I think for me, no. Because from the very beginning, the idea or the proposal my professors gave me was work on this with us for a couple of years, and then you go to med school.
Okay, I see.
That was always...
So they always created that transition pathway for you.
Yeah, that was always in the background of our conversation. And so letting go was never an issue, and actually quite relieving almost. Because now, we were moving, the company was growing in a direction and a scale which I really know my limits. Yeah. And that's not something I have the skill set or the experience to do. And especially in biotech, it's not like an app. It's not like a tech company where you can you just got to be hardworking, be creative, get user feedback, iterate, fail fast. All of that normal sort of usual startup lingo and those ideas don't work for biotech.
Yeah.
Because biotech, you're doing 3, 5, 10 years of clinicals, preclinicals, GMP, GLP, before you finally have an asset that eventually fails. Right? And then so you wasted millions of dollars, time, effort, energy. And so I was happy to transition out and to be on the upside, right? To have some money to earn quite a bit during that transition process. And eventually when we went public, sold some equity, came back, bought an apartment. And that was it's for a 20-something-year-old.
That's a pretty crazy moment.
It was quite surreal of a moment for me. But now that I'm where I'm at now, I'm in a very different vantage point, and I look at that. I was like, okay, that's like a good start, but that's just that's very small. That's a drop in the bucket to where I need to go. But yeah.
So you transitioned into working in a fund of funds.
Yes.
And here you were looking at almost like the macro impact of investing into areas. What did you learn from that, and why did you decide to move away into Pebble?
Well, I learned a lot, but I think the most important thing I learned is calculating failure into your portfolio construction, and also just understanding risk, how to evaluate it, and how to mitigate it over time. I think those are the biggest takeaways, and the privilege of a fund of funds is that we get access to so many funds. Without disclosing too much, we were LPs in all the top performing China VC PE firms, and it's China only fund of funds. And so I had straight up access and visibility to what the top performers were doing. And when we do a meta-analysis, we see that the top performers, there's like a 4% chance that a company would return over 10x to your investment.
4%.
4% chance. Yeah. And so and these are only the best performing people. These are best performers. So people who are making 30-40% IRR over the fund vintage. So if there's a 4% chance, then you must construct your portfolio such that you need at least 30-something companies in order for one of them to have a chance to return your fund. So then being very rigorous in picking projects that have that potential to scale, but also mitigating risk over time, and also being disciplined in divesting.
Can you be more specific about what you mean by risk mitigation? Can you give like an example?
Okay, so with the Accelerator now, so I'm jumping ahead a little bit. Yeah. But going to the Accelerator, my philosophy is to stick to what I know, and that's 0 to 1. That's my own experience with Moogene. Yeah. And this is I wish to continue with that path. And when I'm mitigating risk, I'm taking a project, I'm taking it to my lab, my team, and we're analyzing this, and we define our milestones and endpoints very clearly. And once we hit them, and we have a value inflection, we're happy to sell, which is contrary to your typical VC logic and thinking. Because other VCs are, if you're a tech VC, you're thinking, hey, let's grow this asset, and then it's exponential. Right, you hold it all the way until it's 1,000x. You want that one project that's a home run that brings it back. Yeah. Biotech, because the nature of biotech development is so much slower, that game of having many assets in one that blockbuster that brings it up, returns it all, doesn't work unless you have a huge pool of money. Huge. Like let's say you need 30. Let's say you want to invest in 30 assets. Okay,
Yeah.
40 assets. 40 assets, and each of them you need to be deploying at least $3 to $5 million to have a meaningful return. And so just take that 4 times 5 mil. You're already at to 200 million, right? No, sorry, 2 billion. You need a $2 billion fund in order to justify
Like
Yeah.
one.
one
One winner.
one winner. So I don't have $2 billion, not yet.
Not yet.
I have a couple million to
Yeah.
to play with. We got triple digits, but so then how do I continue to achieve higher IRR, upsize returns for my LPs and investors while controlling risk is by really engineering the whole development cycle, the process, 0 to 1 part of it, to be very specific in our value add.
Yeah.
So one example is, I have a portfolio company that is a microfluidic chip for oocyte sort of an improvement. It improves the quality of your egg, reduces the probability of aneuploidy. So like it's a mitochondrial transfer sort of mechanism to strengthen and recover unusable eggs, and also to make usable eggs stronger.
Yeah.
So with this company, I take it to the whole TigerMed team, and we're evaluating it. We're thinking, this is like maybe probably an NMPA category 3, device. So which clinical trial center in China, which PI, which how, and it's very specific. And we go down, we plan it all out, and then once we do, we see how much will that cost, and then we let's fund it. Then the accelerator, we fund it. And then once we achieve that, then we have the whole ecosystem under TigerMed, under Tiger Jade to sort of follow up on that. And so it's sort of like companies that are building things for Google. We're like building that, but we're building biotech assets for bigger biotech companies to take on to the next stage. And then once it hits that next stage, I let go. I'm happy to sell.
Should we go a step back actually?
Sure.
So let's talk about how you came into Pebble Accelerator.
Yeah.
Because it's essentially an arm of Tiger Jade, which is like a CRO based in China, right?
Sure.
Yeah.
So after the fund of funds, and learning all about how all the funds operate and what makes a good high performing fund, I had the opportunity to spin out my own little sort of angel fund.
Yeah.
Just my own money and some partners, some good friends. And then we were investing in 200K, 300K all across the Greater Bay Area, all across Hong Kong, Shenzhen, Macau, Zhuhai. Just looking at assets that have that need that help, that boost to convince the professor to, hey, maybe you file a patent, incorporate a company, and then we'll try to raise money. So that was the thesis of our little angel fund. And then during that process, we encountered Tiger Jade. And Tiger Jade is a completely offshore, so it's a US dollar fund of, it's not a corporate VC. Tiger Jade is the one of the largest LPs is TigerMed. And TigerMed is the largest clinical research organization in China. And so, TigerMed services about 1.5% of the global clinical trial research market share. That's
how much percent?
1.5.
1.5.
Yeah, and it's already at the top in the top 10 of the most. It's listed in Hong Kong. It's about 100 billion Hong Kong dollars.
Yeah.
The market cap around there. It fluctuates, but during that time, Tiger Jade was leading a deal that my little angel group, meaning Pebble, invested in. And during that time, we got to know the Tiger Jade team quite well. And then we decided that actually Tiger Jade has a lot of venture building ambitions to understand the Hong Kong ecosystem, to understand what's going on at the Greater Bay Area, on like in the lab level. And that's not something that Tiger Jade had built out at the time, because Tiger Jade, the managing partners were finance background and consulting background, fund investment background, not really in the labs, and me being, a member of the ethics committee for the hospital authority, being a part of the science park at the time, the development panel, advisory panel, I had a lot more access and exposure to what's going on locally, and so it just became it was a logical collaboration, or like joining of forces, because they have TigerMed, the whole empire ecosystem, global to support, and they want basically this scouting acceleration platform. They want to build it out, but instead of just building out from scratch, I've already been doing that with my own money, with my own partners, my friends. So we just decided, hey, why don't we put it together and make it an accelerator? It's called the Tiger Jade Pebble Accelerator. Yeah. And so basically, I'm continuing what I've been doing this whole time, but now with the full backing and support of Tiger Jade, and thus TigerMed.
And is that also backing like capital support?
Yes. So Tiger Jade is invested in the accelerator, and the accelerator is a holding company. It's a company. And so it's not a fund, it's not a GPLP. We operate it as, because it's such a value-adding entity, we really just put a lot of work into each project that we put money in. And
so do you personally put money into these companies now, or it's Tiger Jade that puts money into the companies?
Okay, so Tiger Jade put money into the accelerator, into the Pebble, we'll just call it Pebble, and then Pebble does put money into projects too. Yeah. For a couple of reasons. Well, one reason is for the cleanliness of the portfolio, of the Tiger Jade portfolio. Right, because Tiger Jade, the average check size of Tiger Jade is about like $3, $4, $5 million. Right, that's around the check that Tiger Jade is writing. But Pebble isn't writing those check sizes. The max it can write is maybe $1 million. Right, Pebble is anything $1 million and below. Those are our sweet spot. Yeah. And so if you keep doing those investments, then all of a sudden you might have a portfolio at the Tiger Jade level with 20 to 30 assets that are in the $3 to $10 million range. And then all of a sudden you have like 100 companies that are like 1 million below. It skews the portfolio. It messes with the performance. And so that's one reason. The other reason is because we don't see the accelerator as a fund that has a fixed term in life. Like we really are there to add value to every company and to stick with them over time and grow with them. The idea is almost like we're investing in McDonald's when they only have one shop. Yeah. And then by the time McDonald's is McDonald's that it is today, Berkshire Hathaway is it's the holding firm. And that's the dream, I think, for the accelerator, is that it'll become like a Berkshire Hathaway, but for biotech assets that we've built, that we've put in blood, sweat, and tears into building alongside CEOs. Yeah. And we'll sell down our stake over time, just as appropriate. So let's say we have a company under the accelerator, and it has a 3 or 4x. We're happy to offload our cost, our principal. And also to maybe plus a little bit to return capital to investors, or as a dividend, or or maybe we could recycle that money back into the company to grow it, to invest in new projects. So there's a lot more flexibility when we're actually so hands-on in company building and not really a GPLP structure. So there's a lot of legal sort of nuance in why we did so. But yeah. So that's how we're structuring it now.
And the other partners who you work with, do they also have like the operational experience you've had in going from 0 to 1?
From 0 to 1, the others don't. I think that's why they wanted me to join forces with them. Yeah. They have more experience in, let's say, they've got a big drug that's launching in a new market. One of our partners, one of the managing partners, was in charge of launching new products in the Middle East, for example, for a huge pharmaceutical company. So they have experience in sort of already mature assets, but then really early stuff, it's a different ball game. Yeah.
So, I mean, because clinical development is so long, right? Let's say, like in general, at least 7. If not more years in just the clinical development phase, is the idea that you stay with these founders for quite some time then?
Yes and no. Yes, in that we would like to be a part of their story the whole way. So we do like to hold a portion of our like if a company is successful, we would like to hold some of it until the end, until IPO and post. Maybe it's really about supporting that founder and helping them grow. But then no, because we also have a responsibility to our shareholders to return capital, at a reasonable pace. And so once we hit certain milestones, once we hit certain targets, we need to be disciplined about divesting. So we will, we structure our divestment schedule based on internal projections and targets for IRR and stuff like so that we are not just sitting on money and just this forever for 7 years. I think that's more appropriate for a GPLP to sit on money for 7 years.
Yeah.
But we need a bit of cash flow. We need to cycle it somehow.
So your cycle you think is less?
Yes, I would almost say that as soon as assets hit phase 1, we're happy to sell. We're happy to sell our cost at the very least.
Yeah.
And then And the theory or the hypothesis is that it can generate sort of consistent returns that are maybe in the 3 to 4x range, but not like 1,000x. That's not what I'm going for.
Yeah.
Which is a completely different philosophy to most traditional VCs. Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah. And how do things like cycle time or fund size, like we were talking about 3 to 4x, 1,000x, how does that impact how you make decisions about who to invest in?
The first layer is that it needs to be big enough.
Yeah.
That every investment we make must always have the potential to return the fund.
Yeah.
So that is a non-negotiable sort of trait, and we do that. We do a variety of analyses, comparable analyses. We're looking at sensitivity of the sensitivity analysis based on current market competitors, current the market size. We try to do a DCF. If it has 0.1% of the market, how much sales would that be? If it partners with somebody, we do a Bayesian analysis of the probability of its success. The multiple paths. Maybe it can succeed here and then fail here, and then what does that mean for the potential revenue or the 10 years from now? We do, it's like a very investment banking, like Jeffries sort of, like a discipline.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, everybody's wrong. Nobody is ever right in their projections.
Yeah.
But because I'm not trying to be right, I'm just trying to convince the next round to take me on, to believe in our story.
So the question you have to ask is just, can this person raise another round, essentially?
Well, can it raise... basically. Can this project justify a valuation jump, within the time frame that I need it to?
Which is what, 3 years?
Depends on, and then depends on the upside. Like if the potential upside is so much bigger, then I'm happier with a longer timeline.
Yeah.
Like if the potential here is like, actually we really see that there's potential here for like 1,000, 10,000x, a 5-year timeline, that's okay. But if we're looking at a 3 to 4x target as a base case, again, all of these projects have the upside potential of returning the fund. They must have that upside potential. But at the base case, if they're at a 3 to 4x, and we're like, maybe 3 to 4 years, that's what we're targeting, and also identifying how we can add value to help them achieve that. Yeah. If our team doesn't think, if our lab is like, there's nothing we can do for this because we just gotta wait for clinical data to come out, then we're not interested in that. But if we're like, hey, we have this portfolio company, that company, these companies can all chip in and do something more to help that accelerate the value creation, then it's very interesting. Then we're happy to invest in.
Okay, so you're like, you meet a company and you're like, within the next 3 years, I believe that their valuation could grow like at least 3 to 4 times.
Sure.
Then they already qualify at the base level.
At a base case, sure. We can think of it that way. But again, it goes back to a more fundamental scientific question as to why will it be 3 to 4x?
Yeah.
It'll become 3 to 4x because it hit clinical milestones.
Yeah.
Right. And what are these milestones, and who is looking at these readouts know which companies in the world are interested in potentially buying this asset or partnering or licensing. Like that, we must also very clearly map out. And so all of that then comes back down to the science. And how can we, again, mitigate the risk of the science, and sometimes, I have a portfolio company that's doing, using AI to modify the culture media. And so maybe we can look at a project, we see a project coming out of a university and we think, hey, actually, we can improve the yield, of this process by 70%, we think. And then we go to our, just by modifying the culture media. And that's a significant value we can add, and that's risk mitigation, in a very practical sense. Yeah. So
it's interesting. I mean, we've talked a lot about the science and the statistical analysis behind why you invest, but how often is it based off of the person? Because things are slightly different in biotech, yes, but at earlier stages, at that 0 to 1 stage, to what extent is that 0 to 1 driven by the individual behind it?
It could be a deal killer, for sure, right? If the founder and the team are not strong or not coherent, not aligned in vision, or you just don't like them. That's also
really?
that's also very, very possible. I don't want to be on calls and trying to figure out clinical trial plans or preclinical remodeling with somebody I don't like. So it's especially in China, I think it does matter a lot.
Who the person is.
Who the person is, and the interpersonal, the relationship, the 关系, it does matter. But to what extent and how, it depends on person to fund by fund. But at the very least, integrity of the founder is something that I think across the board everybody is very concerned about. And we actually have an internal discussion of whether or not we should evaluate our founders based on their personal, situation.
What do you mean?
Like, are they married? How much personal debt do they have? Are they dating? Do they have affairs? Are they getting in the middle of a divorce? How many kids do they have? All of that. Should we evaluate that and have some sort of scoring mechanism to evaluate the risk of this founder, messing things up because of a mistress? That's very common.
Really?
Yeah.
Is that common? I have never heard of that.
That's a common
before.
problem, especially I feel like in China.
So a founder messes up their startup because of a mistress. How does that even work?
Well, because they get distracted. They get out of it, and then they're like, they can't focus on work. Their priorities become different, and then your original vision of where a company should go, your vision and mission, it all just changes. Maybe it can become messy. It can become really messy. And what if they have a divorce? If they have a divorce, and then the ex-wife is coming for half of their equity.
Take half of their equity?
Yeah. So
no way.
So how do you fight that?
Consider that.
Yeah. Why would we want to have the ex-wife on? And if she has half of the equity, is she entitled to a board seat? And if the founder is hit below, then maybe they should be they get kicked off if they hit below the threshold. There are many weird potential situations that could happen with messy founders. That's a big factor actually.
So do you prefer founders who are single?
No, not particularly.
Yeah.
I've heard an LP once ask a company, the CEO, "Are you married?" He said, "Not yet." "Not married, not investing."
Why?
Yeah, because that particular LP is very believes in, they need to be driven by family. Is why are they doing this? Why are they they want to save the world, they want to do it, cure cancer or whatever. But at the end of the day, who are they making money for?
Oh, wow.
Are they making money to spend
Yeah.
on themselves, to buy cars, to buy a private jet, or are they spending it to raise a family? Or what if,
Yeah.
different LPs, investors have different priorities, but it's always in the back of our mind. It's always, I think a more disciplined way would be to have some sort of framework, like a rubric or like an objective analysis of this founder and their team. I think
Yeah.
that'd be the ideal way to do it. But it's very subjective at the end of the day, whether or not you trust a founder, whether or not you have a gut feeling that they have enough grit to get through the difficult times.
I find it interesting because often what I see in Europe and in the UK is that a lot of founders in healthcare, biotech, medtech are much older than, let's say, fintech or other industries.
Sure.
And I feel there are pros and cons, right? Because with older founders, you have this kind of stability that you're talking about, who are probably married, have kids, and are maybe building towards that vision of providing for their children. But they're also potentially not as hands-on and as grit as the younger founders you'll see in general tech, right? And that is one thing to notice as well, because often with my single friends, we joke about how would one even work 8 hours a day only? Because, we don't do anything on weekdays except for work, right? It's not like we have families to take care of in the evenings. So I don't know how that factors into things, in your opinion.
And I will add to that as well.
Yeah.
Especially with biotech, most founders are professors.
Yeah.
They already have a job. They already have a stable income from a university, and they've probably tenured maybe already, maybe not yet. But either ways, a lot of these actually older founders, they're older because the discipline demands it. I think you need to have failed.
Yes.
You need to have messed up your assays, and you need to have messed up your cell cultures quite a few times before you begin to understand what it means to do it right, to do research correctly. And it just takes time. It just takes years of failure. And that's, I think, going back to Moogene, one of the very key reasons as to why I was so happy to step away. Is that I knew I haven't failed enough. I knew I don't have that experience as a researcher focusing on science. But the issue of grit, and whether the personal situation of younger or older, I think especially in biotech, younger founders are less. How do I put this? I think for biotech especially, younger founders are not preferred in general, because the capital cost is just so big, it's just so high. I'm trying to think of a young founder in my portfolio, and to be honest, now that I'm thinking through it, none of the young founders are working on pharmaceuticals.
Yeah.
They're all doing something digital.
Yeah.
Right? I have a vet telemedicine platform.
Interesting.
Young female founder.
Yeah.
I have a wellness and healthcare platform for the Greater Bay Area, also sort of like an app marketplace, does employee benefits for multinationals. Young founder. I can't think of any, honestly, I can't think of a single pharmaceutical project with a founder that's under 40.
So you were definitely an anomaly.
Well, I was
Moogene.
a mule, right? It was really the professors. They're
Yeah.
all over 40. They're the real founders.
Yeah.
I was just the executor, and so that's a little bit different.
So that's maybe a nice model to have that kind of blend of
I think that's a good
older
model.
professors and then the
Yeah,
young
actually,
student.
you need to have that energy to push forward. You need to have somebody to stay on top of things. That's very true.
Yeah.
When professors are busy with their grants and reports and grading essays and their PhD students' theses, somebody needs to be pushing and dealing with the VCs and managing the clinical trials, and somebody has to be doing that, and somebody with the grit and the passion. Actually, you're very right. I think having a blend of two might actually make for a good founding team profile. Or it's just a team of young, energetic professionals. There are some teams that are in their late 30s, 40s that are still young, but very, very highly accomplished and very well achieved. But I'm thinking of one person in particular who just turned 40, but still single. But has built multiple multi-billion-dollar companies. Very impressive.
In your portfolio?
In my portfolio, yeah. One guy, and he, a Stanford professor. Rare, but I guess that's part of my job is to find these people and to invest in them. Yeah, so.
I think a lot of the characteristics we talked about previously were maybe more risk mitigation, like not going through an affair. What are the sort of characteristics you look for that are, those positive traits, those rare traits, that when you meet a founder who has X, it makes you want to continue the conversation?
I think consistently for me, I like founders who are very conscious about controlling cost and optimizing hitting clinical trial endpoints at minimal costs but also the shortest time possible. Yeah. Because you hear about these companies all the time that raise hundreds of millions of dollars. Yeah. And then the first thing that the CEO does is, puts a wine fridge and a golf, putting range in their own office. How big is this office? Geez. I think that's always a red flag for me. Is somebody who is not,
cost conscious.
Yeah, cost conscious. Yeah. And then. But what is, I'm trying to think, what is a plus? What's a green flag? I think that was, what you were asking for. I think green flags are often very heuristic. And so generally, like having published data is important. Yeah. But then if the patents are not ready yet and you don't want to publish the data before the patents are fully granted, then it's also difficult to balance that. So maybe just a simple heuristic is that everyone in my inner circle likes this founder. My inner circle being my advisors, my managing partners, the people I work with regularly that I trust and know and respect. Yeah. The scientists and the professors that I work with. Generally everybody has at least one conversation with the prospective founder. Yeah. And then if the whole consensus is everybody agrees that yes, this person is of high character, is high achieving, should be able to execute on the plan, then I think that's the.
Is that like a general consensus, or is there like a rule where it's like
it's not
everyone must agree?
No, by far not a rule. General consensus, I think. Yeah. It's also hard for me to, because I'm not that old. I haven't read people for that long. Right? Yeah. You have people who've had, who've analyzed behaviors and CEOs for decades. I'm not there yet. But yeah, so relying on my inner circle to guide me and help me out a little bit on that, I think.
How many deals do you think you've evaluated now?
In the past 2 years, upwards of 400.
Upwards of 400?
Yeah, I think I get a new deal one every other 2 days. One every other day. Yeah, I have something come across my desk. That's new. Yeah.
And so, okay, let's talk about, so you've analyzed 400 deals. What is the number one thing for a startup to do, sitting on your desk? What's like the number one thing to do, and what's an example of that if fundraising?
Number one thing to do?
Yeah.
I really care most about the disease you're targeting and the mechanism of action. Mm-hmm. you need to explain that to me very clearly and quickly.
Yeah.
And yeah, and if the disease indication is not one that I believe in, I very quickly just tune you out.
Really?
Yeah.
How fast? Like, do you just tell them immediately?
I don't even tell them. I just okay, got it, and then I stop paying attention. I start thinking about, what am I
having for dinner?
What am I having for dinner? Yeah, yeah. I'm pretty quick. It's probably not good. I think I haven't done a full analysis. How I like data and stats, and I think it'd be. Eventually, I'll do an analysis of the deals I passed on and how many of them are, actually ended up successful, and why I was wrong in being dismissive so quickly. But most of the time, if it's not, it doesn't. In a way, also, if it doesn't excite me.
Yeah.
If it's a disease indication that I'm like, I don't really care about that. I don't think that's a problem. I don't just being facetious and just being, just like a company that makes your eyebrows brown, or something like that. I really don't care.
Yeah.
A company that helps you weight loss supplements or whatever, like anything that is in that space, I immediately just switch off. Don't care. Even if it's like, some sort of probiotics for your gut to help you, improve your immunity, blah, 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 and, improve the survival rate of cancer patients, blah, that's not really interesting to me.
Yeah.
I like cutting edge things. I like things that are really, truly, ideally first in class.
Yeah.
And targeting new diseases that are severely underserved. And then really understanding, what it is you're trying to what's the problem you're trying to solve.
Yeah.
And how are you doing it? And just do I believe that what you're trying to solve is actually a problem, and the way that you're doing so will actually be effective. That's it. And that's I within 5 minutes, I already have some sort of a quick sorting in my brain already, in my mind. Like, yeah, I like this disease. I like the way this approach. I know this approach might work. Now I'll pay more attention. It takes about 5 minutes for me to make that decision.
Have there been any cases where you're like, this approach definitely is not going to work?
Yes.
Really?
Yes. Quite a few. And in those cases, I also sometimes just straight up tell the founder as well, the guy pitching to me.
You're like, I don't think it's going to work.
I don't like this mechanism. I don't like this pathway. I don't think you should be doing it this way, And of course they all get defensive, but yeah, there was once a diagnostic company came up to me and it was pitching some mechanism to identify the sperm motility, to like diagnose the health of your sperm, and your also some like prostate indicators, some sort of biomarkers indicative of prostate health. Very simple. And then what? Okay, you find out that your sperm are weak. Now what? What's the intervention? Who's gonna pay for this? Who would
What's next?
Who's gonna pay for this? How does it? Why would the hospitals want? Why would people want it? Product market fit. A lot of times, professors have great product, but there's no market, or the market that they imagine is the wrong market. It's actually not the patient that's paying for it. It's a hospital, or it's an insurance company, or like who's actually paying for it. They got to figure it out. But yeah, quite a few actually.
Have there been cases where you've told the founder, look, I don't think it's going to work like this, and then they've kind of gone back, thought about it, learned, and come back to you with a version where you're going to invest now?
I haven't deployed capital yet in those companies. But there have been a few that I've been following, I've been tracking. And yeah, in the beginning, it's like, it doesn't really work. I don't think this business model works. I don't think this mechanism, this approach, this modality, I don't think it works. And I think you need to do your clinical trials this way to prove, non-inferiority. I think that's the baseline. And then, some of them actually, whether it's directly because of my advice or just because I'm just one of many voices telling them to pivot or to think about it this way, I think that's generally the case. I don't think I'm not the smartest guy in the room. There are plenty of people, other VCs I'm sure that they're pitching to, that are in the healthcare space that'll tell them similar things. And then they pivot, they adjust, and then I'm still keeping track of those. I'm still looking to see how they read out. And if it's good, happy to invest at a more expensive valuation. Yeah, that's generally not a problem. Yeah.
And what's the number one don't?
The number one don't?
Yeah.
Don't be an asshole. Right? I think that's just generally the biggest problem is that once you come into a meeting and you're like very I think a lot of times professors come in or founders come in and they're very illustrious in their academic career.
Yeah.
And they've poured in decades of their life into their work. Fair, fine. But then they see me and they just assume I'm some young brat who doesn't know what I'm doing. And then when I try to explain to them my perspective from where I'm sitting as to how they should change their asset, how they should change their strategy, they very quickly dismiss me or very quickly just become defensive. And those are very quick
no's.
Quick no's.
Yeah.
Quick no's.
Yeah. I mean, when you first started pitching, right, you said you had 700 pitches. Mm-hmm. How did you kind of transition to learn how to answer questions in an open way? Because I think when I started out, I struggled with that as well, where I used to feel like when people would ask me questions that they were almost like attacking me, and I would be like, oh no, what do I say? And it took time to learn how to reframe. I don't know if you found the same.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, I've always welcomed attacks. I don't know. I feel like it's I didn't know better as well back then, but if they were coming at me, happy to try to defend, and if they're happy to listen, it's just about how do you convince somebody?
Yeah.
Right. It's how do you be convincing to somebody who is already against you from the get go?
It's definitely not arguing with them.
Yeah, it's not to argue, it's not to be defensive, it's not to be, but it's to be like, okay, so I hear what you're saying, and it's almost like an improv thing, yes and.
Yeah.
Yeah, yes and. I see what you're saying, I see this completely, usually the best thing I like to completely agree with your criticism.
Yeah, but.
But
yeah.
Your criticism does not apply. Because blah, 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 blah. But what you just said is 100% correct.
Yeah, I love that strategy.
Right?
Yeah.
It's like what you said makes sense. And most of the time it does, but their criticism, if it, redirecting that so you are both affirming what they're saying.
Yeah.
And trying to present your case in a different viewpoint.
Yeah.
It's improv. It's yes and. And I think that's the best strategy for founders that are trying to pitch and get out there. Unless it's like, it took me a while to get into a position, be like, no, you're wrong. I think that's only people in a position of power and privilege get to tell other people, no, you're wrong. That they're wrong. Yeah. And and now being the one that's on the buy side. Sometimes I get to tell people, no, you're wrong. But on the sell side, I think yes and is always the right approach, I think.
And then let's move on to, I guess, the main topic of this conversation.
Sure.
How should founders go about raising venture financing from Chinese investors? Mm-hmm. This is probably a big question, or even like big question mark in a lot of people's minds, especially outside of, Asia, because obviously the markets in other economies right now have not been booming in the last year. Mm-hmm. I think venture financing into biotech has fallen something 60 to 70% across the US and Europe. So I think a lot of people are looking at alternative options. I see a lot of founders going for high net worth individuals, both in the Middle East and China. But how actually should founders approach this? And how accessible are those routes currently into Chinese investors?
Right now, what I'm seeing, this is myself from where I'm sitting, is that there's a lot of RMB funds in the market. And they do have a little bit of pressure to deploy. But it's all, the money can't leave the country.
Interesting.
And so if you really want to raise money from China, I think the best and easiest way is to be willing to open some sort of manufacturing facility or some sort of distribution office or something in China, where you can also then apply for the government subsidies and the government grants. I think, a lot of places, you go to Shenzhen Bio Bay, you go to Binjiang in Hangzhou, you go to, Zhejiang, of course, Science Park in Hong Kong. Lots of different of these biotech sort of hubs are offering companies, subsidies to set up an office locally, to hire locally, anywhere from 2 million RMB to 2 million USD. It's quite a wide range. And companies that are willing to do that and to put in that effort to set up a base in China to do something, then that RMB can go into, it's difficult to have that money go into a Cayman, but it could go into the China entity. And then that China entity can then have a VIE structure, which then feeds back out to the Cayman. So somehow you need to work out with your lawyers how to get the economics right, such that the investors in the China entity are sufficiently compensated, fairly diluted when it comes to structure and ownership with the Cayman. It can get a little bit complicated. But the easiest is, of course, if you have a Cayman and the RMB fund is okay with investing in the Cayman, which oftentimes it's not.
Why?
So it's just capital controls. Okay. It's just difficult to get money out of China.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's so. You might even set it up as a completely separate company. Set it up as a joint venture. I think instead of trying to do a VIE with a Cayman and it gets really complicated with multiple layers, just set up a new joint venture in China. And then you can use that money in China to then pursue, let's say it's a multi-center clinical trial. You would need to have clinical trial centers in China and sites in the US, maybe in Australia, maybe in Europe. And then that becomes a very legitimate reason for you then to transfer money out of the Chinese entity to outside of China. But in general, also setting up a JV in Hong Kong is actually quite a good move. Yeah. Because RMB and US dollars can both come. It's free to circulate.
So Chinese investors can invest in a company in Hong Kong, and then the money in HongOng can move freely, essentially.
Can become a US
world.
Dollar. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. So Hong Kong actually is a very useful place, and especially now with the whole bioprocessing limitations, the Biden's executive order, right? Before, Chinese companies would go to Boston and go shopping. Right? Yeah. Chinese pharma would go license things out of Boston all the time. Now they can't because now it's national security or for whatever reason. But Hong Kong they still can. So I've been seeing a lot more Chinese Shanghai pharma companies coming to Hong Kong to look for assets.
Into Hong Kong
Investing
companies.
into Hong Kong companies or Hong Kong joint ventures or buying up assets, or licensing assets out of Hong Kong and that are actually just originally from the U.S. or from the U.K.
But why can they invest in Hong Kong and not European or UK companies?
Oh, it's just RMB is just easier to come into Hong Kong to transfer into Hong Kong dollars and to go through the banks.
Is that like a limit? Is there like a limit essentially when you're transferring into UK or European countries, and that's what causes the the preference to Hong
I think
Kong?
it flags a bunch of these issues with CFIUS is one problem in the U.S. They're like, who are these Chinese shareholders? How much assets do they have? And the U.K. as well is being more conscious about allowing Chinese investors to invest in their assets as well. It's more a geopolitical issue nowadays.
Yeah.
Where you actually have regulators, preventing M&As from happening because
really,
yeah. Sino Biopharm was recently blocked from buying an asset in the U.S. that then took a couple months to resolve. But yeah, of course there are U.S. dollar Chinese funds.
Mm-hmm.
They have offshore structures, but all the investors are in China. That's more straightforward. And then how do you approach them? How do you reach them and get their attention? That too is also relatively straightforward. I think China does a pretty good job with its conferences, you need to get WeChat if you don't have it. First of all, that's like basic. You download WeChat and get an account. But I think there are quite a few demo days in China from different VCs, and the relational nature of China is such that you eventually by networking you'll get to the right people in China, I think.
Interesting. I mean, so your first company, Moogene, was out of Dartmouth in the U.S., and you were kind of raising your first round there. What are the sort of differences you see in the process between what you were doing in the U.S. versus China?
The U.S. is much more open still, meaning that you can go to pitch competitions and you can go to, the VCs in the U.S. are still quite open to listening to new ideas, to listening to being exposed to people who want to pitch to them. China is more enclosed. China, I feel like it's a bit more referrals basis.
So you better know the people you want to talk to.
Yeah, I think it's much more like, especially, like I'm trying to think of. Oh, okay. Maybe I should qualify that by saying my network in China now is much stronger than my network was in the U.S.
Yeah.
Back then I had started from nothing, right? It was just a kid out of college. So maybe that definitely biases my exposure, where it was a lot of it were cold calls. A lot of it were first time encounters. But now I'm in a position where it's like a couple phone calls to get the right people to listen to you. And that's very different dynamic. But in general, I think China, when you're doing business in China or to doing it with Chinese investors, you will come across national interests.
National interests.
You will come across like the municipality, the Shenzhen government or the local government, and it's all about how can your company sort of be aligned with their agenda, with what they want to achieve. And it's not. It's never nefarious, I would almost say. It's very, very much about like creating value, generating value. Having more IPOs, creating jobs.
Yeah.
I feel like that's 90% of the time that's what the governments and the want. There's no competition. There's nothing about with the geopolitical tension now. A lot of people are worried about am I working with the Chinese government or am I working? No. It's all about just improving the livelihood of people, improving your business, your GDP, your numbers, your the community, and I believe we as biotech investors, as biotech founders, we fight disease, right? We have a common enemy. It's illness. We don't fight people, and so, but when it comes to China, you will be most successful if you understand that. And you render to Caesar what is Caesar's, and so be it, and you just work hard on doing science, to the best that you can in a collaborative international community. And don't be too because you can also take money from the NIH. That's a government entity, right? And taking money from the Chinese Academy of Sciences, I don't see a difference in that. And it's just being conscious and aware that these government relationships and government agendas are much more important in China than they are in anywhere else than the States, or that's my view anyways. How eventually you will run into some sort of state interests.
And in general, would you advise founders at present to wait it out if possible, or to raise?
No, don't raise whenever you can. I will. Okay, well, wait it out in that what is your next clinical? What is your next milestone? Do you have enough money to achieve to reach it? And do you have enough money to pivot if you fail? And what is that pivot? And if that pivot, will that pivot be able to help you to justify raising more capital after that? Very, very fundamental, basic question about cash flow. Okay.
Yeah.
If the answer is we're about to raise, we should raise, then raise. And if even if the market's bad, you don't have a choice. You gotta raise anyways. But now actually, if you are willing to set up in China, to set up in Hong Kong, and to pursue this path of international collaboration, now's a pretty good time.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of drive and incentive and policy focus on biotech in the healthcare sector. The Hong Kong government is supremely supportive in giving visas and helping you set up. They set up a whole new department in the government, the Office of Attracting Strategic Enterprises. It's called OASES, OASES. It's a whole new government department, 3 months old, that's just there to help. And they have a person dedicated to biotech. And their job is just to help biotech companies to land in Hong Kong and then Invest Hong Kong, the Trade Development Council. Those are all, they have biotech dedicated team members just to help deal flow, to create deals, to match investors with projects. And it's a new push that's been really, I think, that will really change the whole infrastructure and the community in healthcare and development in Hong Kong moving forward, and the whole all of China really,
And so that's a recent development.
Very recent. I think only in the last year. I think only since COVID stopped being, and since only after COVID the restrictions were lifted. Now it's like the government is full throttle in prioritizing healthcare as a key new industry for the Greater Bay Area at the very least.
Yeah.
So now is actually a great time to get exposure and to get into the market. Here. Mm-hmm.
Do you think political factors have impacted Hong Kong's ability to be innovative?
Innovative? I don't think it Hong Kong has. The universities in Hong Kong and the academic institutions have had partnerships with the U.S. and with the U.K., with Australia, with Tokyo, with all the major for decades. 20, 30 years. You hear about how, in Beijing, there was that institute I forget the exact name. There was a French institute that was supposed to be doing some joint research lab with the Beijing Peking University. It didn't happen because of geopolitical tensions. But that doesn't convey to Hong Kong at all. That doesn't, because Hong Kong, like MD Anderson and the Prince of Wales Hospital have been doing oncology research together for like more than 20 years, basically. And nothing's going to change that, and they have so much of their data that is dependent on our clinical trial centers. And actually, we contribute to their Nobel Prize findings, right? We contribute to their research in substantial ways. I don't think it has stifled our ability to be innovative at all. And COVID has hurt a little bit, but that's just COVID. It hurt everybody. It hurt all of science. But in terms of geopolitics, Hong Kong remains robust as a collaboration point between the East and the West. And I think it has never been more important than now, because the more Beijing and Washington are at odds, the more Hong Kong is important as a table for cooperation and dialogue and discussion, right? And international trade is the best deterrent to war and to conflict. So, I think Hong Kong has actually been strengthened through this tension.
Yeah, and now that you're back here, or you've been back here for a while.
Yeah, for a couple of years,
Is part of what you're doing at Pebble also building out the Hong Kong ecosystem of venture financing and biotech?
Yeah, for sure. And I think that is very much with the support of TigerMed as well. So TigerMed is based in Hangzhou. It's Hangzhou TigerMed.
Yeah.
And so they are also setting up an international headquarters in Hong Kong at the moment. And so that would be managing all of their foreign businesses through Hong Kong. And we're setting up Hong Kong's first central lab. Hong Kong hasn't had one. Singapore has had a few, and a couple. Wuxi built a huge facility in Singapore and committed to building there. But Hong Kong right now, we're having the first private central lab that we're building. We're thinking of building an animal lab, medical device lab, a lot of core infrastructure that hasn't existed just yet, and it's all for that translational piece of research and development. We have very strong academics, the best in the world. If you look at any field in Google Scholar, look at nasopharyngeal cancer, the top professor in the world is from Hong Kong. You look at stem cell, the fifth most cited professor is a professor at Macau UST. It's like Hong Kong is really strong academically, but it's that translation. It's that turning that lab into a product, that lab thing. That's missing, and that infrastructure is what I'm trying to build with TigerMed right now.
Is turning things into commercially viable products for patients, basically.
Yeah, and also providing the facilities to make that transition possible. I think it's very much harder before, actually for international companies as well.
Yeah.
If they wanted to get biosamples into China, good luck. Good luck. That customs border is not easy. But you can come into Hong Kong. It's a free port, easy. You have biosamples, landed in Hong Kong, landed in our central lab. We can process it, and then the phase 1 clinical trial centers in CUHK and HKU are both recognized by both the FDA and the NMPA. So one of the few centers in the world that is recognized by both. So I'm very much involved in. I think in the next 10 years, it'll be a very vibrant ecosystem with a lot of infrastructure now that doesn't yet exist. And if you look at Boston, Charles River Labs is sort of like the servicing all the major biotech companies and labs in that area. Our dream and our goal is sort of to create a similar thing, where they've got Charles River, Hong Kong has TigerMed, and TigerMed will then be this sort of highway for all the companies to collaborate, to work together, to build academia, privates, VCs. Yeah, so I'm on the path to building that out, and the government has been very supportive, and and completely free to collaborate with the U.S. as well. Yeah, and I think that's super important for everybody. It's to the benefit of the world that we are maximizing, research efficiency.
That brings me on to my last question for today. What is the number one impact you want to leave on the world with what you're building today with Tiger Jade Pebble Accelerator, and maybe beyond as well?
The number one impact.
Yeah.
I think I would be satisfied if, when I'm old and gray and I'm like 96.
Yeah.
And like back then, can you imagine if you were involved in the invention of insulin, or like you were involved in the eradication of polio? If by then I can be like, you guys, you kids heard of breast cancer? Or you guys heard of a NPC, nasopharyngeal cancer? Yeah. I got rid of it. I think that'll be a life well lived. I think just as a personal goal, where even if I'm not the one that's in the lab slaving away every day, I was like, I helped funded it. I supported the guy who did it.
Yeah.
You know, I'm in the photos. You know, with the professor that cured cancer, so to speak, and then I'm the photo with him. You know, I think that would be mission accomplished. If just some disease, something that I can surely with confidence say that we solved this problem. I think that would be that's the target. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you for coming in today.
No, thanks for having me, and looking forward to you building your company too, and where it'll grow, and how, and we will, our companies will need your services too, I'm sure.
Yes.